Damien walked on stage without hurry. The room stood, of course. He raised a hand that turned bodies back into chairs. He did not look toward the back. He never looked toward the back. His eyes were an ocean that had never needed shorelines. He thanked the investors, the partners, the trust. He mentioned the recent noise without letting the word touch his suit. He gestured toward a screen where a slide had learned to be an alibi. When the Q&A arrived, a microphone traveled from table to table like a chance some people get to be heard before they learn they won't be. Questions formed themselves around risk and resilience and timelines for resolving the concerns. Answers were closed that fit perfectly because they had been tailored for weeks. Nora watched and felt the world tilt back to its usual angle, toward him, photo by photo, handshake by handshake. She did not raise her hand. She stepped into the aisle, held no microphone, and said his name. Not loudly, just correctly. The sound the room made was not a sound. It was attention deciding where to sit. Damien didn't flinch. He took in the line of her and tilted his head half a degree, acknowledgement without gravity. "We'll take moderated questions," he said smoothly. "You told an entry-level employee that criminal liability was legal language for seriousness," Nora said. "You told your team to give ethics a paper trail that leads where you want it to. How many signatures have you turned into a wall?" The first camera found her face. The second found his, the third cut between. The fourth remembered not to pan too quickly. A woman with a headset began to move along the wall with the expression of someone who clears plates quietly. Damien smiled, the kind of smile that thinks it is a mirror. "We take compliance very seriously," he said. "If there were misunderstandings..." "Would you like to hear yourself?" Nora asked, and lifted the cracked phone. Silence rearranged the furniture. The audio that followed was not loud. It didn't need to be. The room had been built to hear men like him. Now it listened to itself. Damien's voice poured over their plates and programs, patient and clean, practicing kindness as leverage, redefining consequences as care, turning a person into paperwork. It ended with the soft sound of a pen pretending to be a decision. When the last word finished, the microphones went on strike. No one spoke. No one knew which face to arrange. Damien's expression didn't change. He glanced toward the side door where the law waits in good hotels, and then back to Nora as if they were the only people in a city that had misplaced its map. "You stole proprietary material," he said, gentle enough for children. "You've done this before." "I returned a briefcase once," she said. "You returned the favor." A murmur tried to start and thought better of it. The woman with the headset reached Nora, hand extended in a gesture that wasn't a request. Security followed without being seen. Nora did not resist. She held the phone where cameras could read its cracked corner and memorize the wound in its glass. She let them take her elbow. Her voice did its last task. "Ethics isn't a department. It's a person who can still sleep after this," she said to the room. "Find that person." They guided her into the hall where carpets teach feet to be quiet. A man introduced himself as counsel for the venue and another as counsel for a far colder room. She asked for water. They brought it because water makes everything look procedural. They did not take her to a precinct. That would have been theater. They took her to an office on a floor with no number and asked again about sources and access and whether Eli Grant had ever contacted her. She kept the geometry that had kept her possible. After an hour, they thanked her like a person being told she'd broken a vase that had already been cracked and let her leave with two men who walked a half step behind her so the hall would know who it belonged to. Outside, the air was the kind that separates the living from the almost. Reporters waited in a cluster like birds who had learned not to fly at night. Questions ticked at her coat. She kept her face still. Across the street, the tower took the sky apart with its sharp lines. In one window on a middle floor, a figure stood without moving. Eli's silhouette knew how to be a question you answer a decade late. He raised a hand without raising it. She did not raise hers. Some acknowledgements shrink when you move them. At home, the tea tin felt heavier. She set it on the table and didn't open it. The city had already read what it needed. She sat by the window and watched the brick wall turn pink for 5 minutes and then gray, and then the color that happens when even the light doesn't want to be seen. She did not cry. The time for crying had passed without telling her when. In the days that followed, the story behaved like all stories that try to unseat money. It flared. It argued with itself. It was declared both overblown and not enough. It spawned op-eds that taught the audience to feel smarter without feeling responsible. Investors issued statements about values that never met their invoices. The board convened internal reviews that promised to take a hard look inward and delivered a gentle glance outward. A subcommittee recommended language updates to the onboarding forms. A podcast made a limited series. Eli sent no more envelopes. He did not need to. The summoning had been completed. He left Voss Dynamics 2 weeks later with a press release that described his exit as a natural evolution and a photograph in which he looked exactly as haunted as he had always intended not to. Amelie stopped wearing the slate blue jacket. In a photo that found Nora by way of a stranger's feed, she stood in a park that belonged to nobody and held a coffee cup and looked at a dog that had none of this in it. The caption said, "Sundays are for remembering yourself." And for the first time in months, Nora felt something move in her chest that didn't hurt to touch. They came for her the following Thursday, not with sirens, with paper, a civil suit filed on behalf of a company that didn't want money. It wanted a bruise in the shape of a lesson, a breach of the terms of her release, an allegation of unlawful recording, a request for injunctions that would turn her silence into a signed arrangement. The law is patient because it knows it is endless. Her court-appointed attorney had eyes that had seen too many versions of the same hallway. He advised settlement. She asked him what settlement tasted like. He said it tasted like forgetting. She said she had given up salt. He stared at his hands, which had never gotten a person out of anything except the room. The offer that arrived from Voss Dynamics was a masterpiece of anesthesia, a modest fine, a non-disclosure with no horizon, a promise not to pursue jail time if she agreed never to speak in any way about any matter, even adjacent to the matters that mattered. It was not a leash. Leashes break. It was a climate. You learn to breathe or you don't. She signed nothing. At the hearing, the judge's voice was a metronome that had been keeping time for so long, it no longer remembered the song. The counsel for Voss Dynamics spoke softly about protecting processes and preserving standards. Nora's attorney spoke about whistleblowing in the tone of someone reading a recipe without ingredients. The judge asked whether she understood the risk of non-compliance. She said she did. He asked whether she wished to reconsider. She said she had done enough reconsidering to last a lifetime. They revoked her parole for the recording. They called it narrow and procedural, and the kind of decision you can eat with a fork. They brought her a printed copy of the order and a pen to acknowledge it knew her name. She signed with letters that looked like a person keeping her handwriting from being taken too. On the transfer bus, the windows were the kind you can see out of only if you've never had to see out of them. The seat in front of her had a carving in the vinyl, a date, 2 initials, a heart that had been scratched through. She rested her forehead on the cool metal and counted the seconds between streetlights until the city let her go. This time, the gray walls didn't surprise her. They welcomed her like a hotel that knows your preferences. She stacked the 2 books they allowed, set the cup, folded the blanket. Nights were loud and then not. Days were fluorescent. She worked in the laundry and handled clothes that would go out into a world she had helped make 1 fraction truer. That was the kind of arithmetic that wouldn't pass an audit and still saved you if you let it. Months unspooled without flavor. Sometimes a clipping made its way in, a government inquiry into vendor protocols across the sector, a resignation at a subsidiary, a settlement in a case whose details were sealed as if truth were a dangerous animal you transport under a tarp. Once, a magazine printed a profile of Damien Voss with photographs that staged him near windows where light chose his face. The headline used the word resilience, and the subhead used the word misunderstood, and the body used every sentence money has ever hired to look like a mirror. The last envelope was delivered through the bar slot on a Tuesday that had used up all its weather. No return address. Inside, a single page torn from her father's notebook. The corner with DV and a diagonal set of numbers she knew were weights, not just because of the units, but because of how they made the air feel heavier. Underneath, in the even hand that never forgot the ruler, a sentence. Some things require you to be brave somewhere no one can see. She didn't cry. She lay on the narrow bed and stared at the fluorescent light until it hummed her quiet. When the count cleared and the quarter settled, she folded the page and placed it inside the spine of the thinner book. Then she closed her eyes and imagined the city raining. Not the brutal kind, the punishing kind, the soft kind that remembers. She placed Amelie in a kitchen that smelled like coffee, and a dog that trusted the morning. She placed Eli in a chair he hadn't earned, and then, finally, was trying to. She placed Damien in a room with no windows that he had built himself. She gave him all the silence he loved and left him there with it. When winter turned, the pink on the brick wall across from the print shop would come back for 5 minutes every morning and turn gray again. She would not see it. The world was a ledger that balanced elsewhere. In a small office where a new receptionist refused to sign a line she didn't understand, someone might ask a better question. In a boardroom where the word transparency had been sanded down until it shone, an investor might remember the taste of consequence. In a cafe that lied about soup, a phone might be lifted to play an audio that had already changed everything it could. Stories don't end, they yield. This one didn't end with a headline or a siren or a confession that satisfied anyone. It ended with a choice made in a room no camera wanted, a consequence taken where applause couldn't reach. It ended with a woman who had no interest in winning, refusing to sell the truth its own leash. When the guard dimmed the lights one last time, the chorus draw exhaled the way buildings do when they think no one is listening. Nora opened her eyes into the low electric and felt the city somewhere beyond the cinder block, turning in its sleep. She pressed her palm against the cool painted wall and let it take her heat. "He taught me wrong," she whispered, and her mouth made the shape of a smile that didn't have to be seen to be true. Honesty doesn't save you. It saves itself. Outside, the rain began again, soft, steady, the kind that teaches streets how to forget without erasing. In a tower with too much glass, a man who had built his world out of reflections watched the drops furl down the window and finally saw what the glass had been trying to tell him for years. That even a mirror breaks when you ask it to be the only face. Somewhere a bell rang over a door. Somewhere a photograph curled at the edges because the air had learned to be warm again. Somewhere a notebook page lay quiet in a spine, folded over a line that kept adding itself up long after the lesson ended. The rain did what endings do best. It turned memory into distance. By dawn, the city had rinsed itself clean of the night's noise, and somewhere in the hum of generators and tires on wet asphalt, a story ended the only way truth ever ends, quietly. Nora Kane never became a headline. There were no monuments, no awards, no justice loud enough to echo through the towers that broke her. But in every office where a pen hesitated before a false signature, in every meeting where a single voice asked why, a trace of her remained. The sound of a woman choosing consequence over comfort became part of the city's pulse. Damien Voss stayed where power likes to live, above consequence, beneath mirrors. He built new walls, wrote new statements, and told himself the rain outside was just weather. Yet sometimes, when it hit the glass just right, he heard her voice again, steady, unafraid, reminding him that honesty doesn't die when people do, it waits. So if you ever find yourself standing in the storm, holding something that isn't yours, a secret, a shortcut, a choice that could make or unmake you, remember Nora. Remember that the truth asks for a price, and pretending not to hear the demand doesn't cancel the debt. If this story moved you, share it with someone who still believes doing right is weakness. Drop your thoughts below. What would you have done in Nora's place? And if you'd like more stories that crawl under the skin and stay there, hit subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next one. Until then, keep your honesty close. The world will test it. I'll see you in the next story.